It's been 6 days since you sprained your ankle, and you still haven't thought twice about it. You iced it, you elevated it. Maybe you took an anti-inflammatory and wrapped it in a brace from a pharmacy shelf. Within a week, you were walking again. Now take away every part of that. Take away the pharmacy. Take away the brace. Take away the idea of just resting for a few days while someone else pays your bills and stocks your fridge. Put yourself instead on the open savanna or in a river valley 60,000 years ago with a shattered leg and a group that needs to move at dawn whether you can walk or not. There were no surgeons, no antibiotics, no stretchers, no ambulances, no buildings built for the sole purpose of keeping broken bodies alive. And yet, we have skeletons, actual human skeletons, tens of thousands of years old, showing bones that broke catastrophically and then healed. People who by every modern assumption should not have survived somehow did. So how did they do it? How did ancient humans survive injuries that, without a hospital, should have been a death sentence? Let's rewind further than you think, because the answer isn't what most people expect. It's not about tough bodies or unusual pain tolerance. It's something stranger and something that's still quietly operating inside you today. Start with the injury itself, the way it would have actually happened. A hunter lands wrong on a rock hidden under leaves. A foot catches in a hole at a dead sprint. The leg buckles, the sound is wrong, and within seconds, everything about that person's life just changed. Here's what most people get wrong about ancient injuries. The pain wasn't the real danger. The real danger was what came after the pain, the sudden, brutal math of subsistence life. A hunter-gatherer group survives by constant motion, gathering, hunting, carrying water, relocating camp before resources run out. An injured person can't do any of that. And in small mobile groups, one missing set of hands doesn't just mean less food for one person. It means the whole group's margin for survival gets thinner. Researchers studying subsistence-based societies today have measured exactly how costly this is. Among some forager horticulturalist groups, illness or injury has been shown to prevent a person from working on more than 1 in 10 days. In other groups, over half the adults report being sidelined for a month or longer at some point by an impairment. These aren't Ice Age populations, but they reveal the same brutal economics ancient humans would have faced. An injury doesn't just hurt one body, it reorganizes an entire group's labor. Now imagine you're the one lying there. You can hear your own heartbeat louder than it's ever been. You watch the others glance down at your leg, then at each other. You're not just afraid of the pain, you're afraid of a much colder question. Can I still follow everyone tomorrow? Because in that world, falling behind wasn't an inconvenience. It could be the last thing that ever happened to you. This is where the story could have simply ended for most injured people, and often did. But we know it didn't always end there, because the proof is sitting in museum drawers around the world, carved into human bone. Take a child buried in Qafzeh Cave in what is now northern Israel, somewhere around 90 to 100,000 years ago. Modern imaging of that skull revealed something striking: a depressed fracture at the front of the skull, consistent with a serious head injury, alongside signs the brain itself may have been affected. That child did not die from that blow. The bone had already begun healing by the time they died. Something, or someone, gave a child with brain trauma enough time and enough care to survive an injury that should have killed them almost immediately. Or take Shanidar 1, a Neanderthal buried in what's now Iraqi Kurdistan. When researchers re-examined his remains, they found a devastating list of impairments: a crushing injury near one eye that likely destroyed his vision on that side, the loss of most of one forearm and hand, an abnormal way of walking, and significant hearing loss in at least one ear. This wasn't a single unlucky day. This was a man living for years, possibly decades, with multiple disabling injuries in an Ice Age landscape most of us couldn't survive for a single week. And yet he lived long enough for all of that damage to heal into old, settled bone. And then there's a case from a cave in Borneo that stunned researchers when it was published only a few years ago. A skeleton, roughly 31,000 years old, missing the lower third of one leg. The remaining bone showed clear signs of healing and years of altered use. Whoever this person was, they survived losing part of a limb as a child in the middle of dense Ice Age rainforest, and then lived another 6 to 9 years afterward. The original researchers argued this looks like deliberate surgical amputation, which, if true, would mean someone 31,000 years ago understood how to control catastrophic bleeding, manage a wound, and keep a patient alive through infection risk that kills people even today. Other scientists have since pushed back, suggesting a severe fracture in a growing bone might explain some of what we see instead. That disagreement is worth sitting with for a second, because it's not a flaw in the story. It's proof that scientists are being careful with something extraordinary, rather than exaggerating it. Even beyond these singular, dramatic cases, archaeologists working in northern Vietnam examined the remains of over 100 ancient individuals from one burial site and found more than a dozen of them carrying old, healed fractures, broken forearms, ribs, lower legs, injuries that would have needed real time and real protection to mend. This wasn't one miracle survivor. This was a pattern across an entire community, stretching back thousands of years. So the bones themselves are undeniable. People survived injuries that should have made life in a mobile foraging world extraordinarily difficult. The real question the documentary, and honestly, the real question your own brain is probably already asking, is how? Part of the answer starts inside the body itself, and this is something worth sitting with, because it's easy to assume that without doctors, nothing happened. That's not true. The instant an injury occurs, your body launches its own emergency response, entirely without your permission. Blood vessels near a wound immediately narrow to slow bleeding. Platelets rush to the site and clump together, forming the first rough plug. A cascade of proteins reinforces that plug into a stable clot. Around a broken bone, the body starts building what's called a callus, a rough bridge of new tissue that eventually mineralizes into solid bone again. Pain itself, as unpleasant as it is doing a job, forcing you to protect the injury by not using it. Your body, in other words, is the very first medical system that ever existed. It began treating you before another human being ever touched the wound. But biology alone has limits. Healing consumes enormous amounts of energy at the exact moment your ability to gather food has collapsed. That's the cruel paradox sitting at the center of every ancient injury. The body needs calories, water, warmth, and time to repair itself, and the injury is precisely what strips away your ability to get any of those things on your own. This is exactly where the myth of the tough ancient human falls apart. Toughness cannot stop arterial bleeding. It cannot replace lost calories. It cannot force a shattered bone back into alignment. What actually mattered wasn't pain tolerance. It was what the group around that injured person chose to do next. And this is where the story becomes less about biology and much more about something distinctly human. Even with no hospitals, ancient people weren't helpless. Some interventions require no advanced technology at all, just basic, observable cause and effect. Pressing on a wound to stop bleeding, immobilizing a limb so it isn't re-injured with every movement, positioning an injured person somewhere sheltered instead of exposed. None of that requires reading a textbook. It only requires paying attention to what makes things better and what makes things worse, and repeating what works. We even have direct proof that ancient people went further than that. Egyptian remains, roughly 5,000 years old, have been found with fractures set using bark splints and linen wrapping, essentially early orthopedic technique. Traditional knowledge recorded from Arctic Inuit elders describes generations of accumulated wisdom about treating fractures and injuries, passed down entirely through memory rather than written medicine. None of this proves exactly what a 100,000-year-old community in Israel or Iraq specifically did. But it proves something important. Humans have repeatedly, independently, in wildly different environments, arrived at similar low-tech solutions to the same brutal problem. That's not luck. That's intelligence, expressed through action instead of theory. Here's the part of this story I find genuinely hard to sit with. Most of what an ancient community likely used to treat an injury, hide bandages, plant fiber wraps, wooden splints, medicinal plants, would have simply rotted away thousands of years ago. Stone tools survive. Soft, organic materials almost never do, which means the archaeological record is quietly biased toward showing us the least important part of ancient medicine, while the most important part, the actual care, is nearly invisible to us. Absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. It just means the most human parts of this story left the faintest trace. And that brings us to what I think is the real center of this entire mystery. Even flawless bandaging, even perfect wound care, cannot solve the deeper problem an injury creates. Someone still has to bring food to a person who can't gather it. Someone still has to bring water. Someone still has to watch over them while the rest of the group is away. In other words, the missing ingredient wasn't medicine. It was other people. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer societies today have documented exactly this kind of support in action. Among AK communities in South America, people who had built strong reputations for generosity received significantly more food and support when they themselves fell sick or injured. Among the Juhoansi of southern Africa, individuals maintained wide-reaching partnerships called khagaro, exchange relationships that functioned almost like insurance policies stretched across dozens of kilometers, ready to be called on the moment things went wrong. Among Tsimane communities in Bolivia, spouses, siblings, and even distant kin routinely stepped in to feed and care for someone who couldn't work for weeks at a time. None of this proves exactly how a specific Ice Age community operated, but it strongly suggests something we tend to overlook: sharing food, labor, and protection with someone who currently isn't producing anything wasn't some rare act of ancient heroism. It was baked into the basic economics of how these societies survived at all. I've spent a lot of time thinking about why this pattern makes evolutionary sense, and the honest answer is that it probably isn't just one reason. Helping an injured relative can protect shared genetic interests. Helping an injured friend today can mean receiving help yourself when your own luck eventually runs out. Individuals known for generosity may simply attract more support when they need it most. And underneath all of that colder logic sits something simpler and harder to fully explain with numbers. Humans form real emotional attachments, and watching someone you love suffer creates a pull to help that doesn't require a spreadsheet of self-interest. Whatever the exact mixture of reasons, the outcome is the same. An injured person wasn't simply a burden to be tolerated. They were often still valuable for the knowledge they carried, the skills they could still teach even while immobile, the childcare they could provide sitting still by a fire. Value in these communities was never only measured by how much food one body could physically bring in that day. Which brings the story back to you, sitting comfortably wherever you're watching this. Every time you injure yourself today, a strange, ancient sequence of events still quietly plays out. You instinctively protect the injured area. You seek out another person. You accept help without a second thought. Your body still floods the wound with exactly the same clotting and repair processes your ancestors relied on, completely unchanged by 100,000 years of civilization. The hospital didn't invent any of this. It simply centralized it, put it under one roof, and staffed it with specialists instead of family and neighbors. The ambulance that carries you, the surgeon who realigns your bone, the nurse who checks on you overnight, the family member who brings food while you can't stand, all of it is a scaled-up, modernized version of exactly what kept that child in Qafzeh Cave alive, what kept Shanidar's Neanderthal alive for years despite catastrophic impairment, what let someone in Ice Age Borneo survive losing part of a leg as a child and then live nearly a decade more. The body heals. That part hasn't changed in 100,000 years. What changed is who, or what, buys that body enough time to do it. So the next time you're handed a diagnosis, a cast, a prescription, or simply someone else's hand helping you off the ground, understand what you're actually witnessing. You're watching one of the oldest survival systems our species ever built, one that never depended on toughness and never depended on any single genius treatment. It depended on this. When one body fails, other bodies choose to compensate. You've been carrying that program longer than you realize. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to Back Times, hit the bell icon, and share this video with someone who loves history.